Ah yes, the age-old question. What is the best Zelda game? The answer is highly controversial, leading to fandoms burning their own kindred at the stake. From the moment Zelda 2 was released on the NES, fans have bickered over the true crown jewel of the Zelda franchise. Many claim Ocarina of Time to be the greatest, a perfect and masterful integration of the franchise into the 3D realm. Others prefer the sequel, Majora's Mask, for its separation from the Zelda formula and unique scenario. There are those who prefer the 2D design of A Link to the Past, those who prefer the beautiful open world of the Wind Waker, and even those who prefer the touching love story in Skyward Sword. Throw in Breath of the Wild and you got yourself quite a debate. All of these are wonderful games with tremendous highs, but for me, the best Zelda game is Twilight Princess. Wow, I didn't know you were a furry. I'm not a furry! I just think Wolf Link looks cool, that's all. Oh yeah, sure, Besides an awesome wolf, Twilight Princess has a lot going for it. A captivating story, endearing side characters, amazing dungeons, and a fantastic assortment of items. I love the game to death. Granted, part of that love has to do with nostalgia, but even after returning to the HD remake, I was still in love with Midna and the game. Twilight Princess will always hold a special place in my heart.
Hey, I didn't come here to listen to you praise Twilight Princess. Start talking crap about the game. Let's go, chop chop.
I'll admit it's not a perfect game, but Twilight Princess deserves way less flack than it gets. There are hundreds of videos, articles, and podcasts out there that will tell you Twilight Princess is a terrible game, or at least mediocre. Look, I can take criticism and critiques of things I love, and listening to the opinions of others can be enlightening. But when you hear it week after week, day after day, that your favorite game is garbage, it gets to you. There's only so much my heart can take. You want to know the fuel behind part of that Twilight Princess hate? The Wind Waker. Go back with me to the year 2002. Rumblings of Nintendo's next system echoed throughout the gaming scene. Nintendo further fueled the fire with a tech demo of Link and Ganondorf sword dueling. Expectations for the next Zelda skyrocketed. Fans drooled over imagining the graphical fidelity of the next Zelda, anticipating it would be the cream of the crop in terms of realistic graphics. Instead, it didn't receive the warmest of receptions initially. Fortunately, The Wind Waker reviewed well and was praised for its unique cartoony style. Yet despite the praise, the haters still bemoaned about what could have been. Perhaps as an answer to the haters' cries, Nintendo revealed a grittier, more realistic Zelda a few years later, Twilight Princess. Upon release, and delay after delay, Twilight Princess was also met with great reviews. But once the typical new Zelda game hype died, the high praise was replaced with disgust. Despite being what fans more or less asked for, Twilight Princess became the butt of the series. The joke, the failure of a child, that one relative that you don't want to mention. What was the catalyst of this intense 180 view? In my opinion, Wind Waker fans. In what can only be described as reverse psychology, many a Zelda fan grew to loathe Twilight Princess because they associated it with hate for Wind Waker. It's as if Twilight Princess was the gamification of the bullying they endured for liking the Wind Waker. So once Twilight Princess's honeymoon phase had ended, the Wind Waker lovers made their move, tearing apart a game that's only sin was existing. Or at least, that's my interpretation of it. Not saying all Wind Waker fans fall into that category, but those who felt bullied for liking Wind Waker saw Twilight Princess as a way to get back at the bullies. I say it's time to put the hatred to rest and decide once and for all which is the better game. With potential Switch versions on the horizon, I mean, you never know, now is as good a time as ever. Truthfully, this is more for my own peace of mind. Am I just a blind Midna fanboy, or can I accurately compare the crucial flaws and stellar achievements of both titles? I will do my best to objectively judge both games. Now let us begin. There's no denying that both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess follow the classic Zelda formula to a T. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing. For those unaware of the term, the Zelda formula describes the basic backbone of story and gameplay progression in most Zelda games. Prologue, 3 dungeons, plot twist or new objective, between 4 or 7 more dungeons, and then the final battle. Since A Link to the Past, Zelda games tended to follow that formula. The formula did eventually wear out its welcome, but at the time of the Wind Waker, the Zelda formula was at its prime. It wasn't until Twilight Princess that fans started to question the overuse of the formula. But there's a reason why Nintendo kept reusing the formula in the first place. It just works. I will always applaud developers for taking new initiatives with their famed series. Trying new gameplay mechanics keeps a franchise fresh. At the same time, the saying, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," applies to the Zelda formula. Up until Twilight Princess, fans were content with finding 3 orbs, receiving a new quest, finding the new key item, building up your strength, and taking out the final boss. It may sound repetitive, but each Zelda game utilized the format uniquely. In that sense, it wasn't so much a lazy formula as it was the backbone of the series, until Breath of the Wild broke the backbone in half. Now, I'm not saying the Zelda formula is essential for a great Zelda game, and I'm not saying games like Majora's Mask and Breath of the Wild are terrible for breaking away from it. What I am saying is it doesn't matter what structure the Zelda games use, it's the details in between that make or break a Zelda game. I believe that the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess utilize the Zelda formula effectively to tell enthralling adventures. The Wind Waker, for example, flipped the concept of Zelda by moving the setting from a typical fairy tale kingdom to the ocean. While you could easily pick out concepts that were more or less borrowed from Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past, the scenery change was so drastic, those similarities were washed up. Sailing the ocean blue and exploring the world by boat is Wind Waker's bread and butter, proving adventure can exist without Link riding a horse, or exploring dry land. However, there are those who complain about the emptiness of the sea, saying it takes too long to get where you need to go, and I'm with them to a degree. There are moments where sailing can be painfully boring. The game tries to make it less painful by tossing in random barrels or pesky enemies, but they're just in my way more than anything. But at the same time, it's exhilarating to explore the islands around you and discover the secrets within. As long as you can patiently travel from island to island, you're good to go. Plus, the HD remake adds to Swift Sail, making your sea voyages much more bearable. Twilight Princess's gimmick is, a little more subtle. You might miss it if you're not paying attention. Oh, there it is! Did you see it? He's a wolf now. I don't blame you for not noticing. It's one of those blink and you'll miss it kind of things. If I'm being completely honest with you, the Wolf Link concept is not my favorite. I think the design is really cool and I enjoy the story implications, but the actual Wolf Link controls are clunky and doesn't work as well as Link in his normal form. It's enjoyable the first couple times you turn into Wolf Link, but I say the novelty wears out right before the 3rd dungeon. At that point, you can't wait to go back to human form. Thankfully, Wolf Link becomes much more enjoyable once you are able to switch freely between forms, although I mostly stay as regular Link. But can you blame me? It's just too fun to play as Link. With his Master Sword and the way he interacts with the environment, Twilight Princess Link controls will always be one of my favorites. I mean, look at this! Cutting grass while moving? Can you do that, Wind Waker Link? No, but can you do this? Big deal, can you do this? Please, can you do this? Why would I want to do that? Can you do this? 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 This? I bet you can't do this. Oh, come on, that's unfair. There are obviously numerous minor details that differentiate the two Links, so it mostly comes down to which gimmicks you prefer. For me, it's Twilight Princess, because at least I can switch between beast and human form. I can't switch the ocean off. Trust me, I've tried. This might be another unpopular opinion, but one of the reasons I love the Zelda series is for the storytelling and the characters you meet along the way. To me, a Zelda game without a gripping story and likable cast isn't really a Zelda game. Well, that's silly. Zelda is all about the adventure. I agree, and part of that adventure is the story being told. Wind Waker tells a terrific swashbuckling adventure on the high seas. Some of the twists are fairly obvious. You mean this castle is actually Hyrule? No way! Tetra is actually Zelda? Ha! But the plot points are still enjoyable and shocking in their own way. For example, diving down to Hyrule Castle for the first time gave me goosebumps. Walking through a frozen in time Hyrule was eerie but beautiful. My main issue with Wind Waker's plot is the pacing. The story flows fairly well towards about 3/4 in, and then you reach the Triforce pieces. Everything comes screeching to a halt. Forget about dungeons, forget about self-contained stories, forget about fun. This is the next 5 to 10 hours. I enjoy exploring and finding secrets on my own time, but when I have to do it to move the plot along, I get kinda bored. The ocean can be boring enough as it is. Adding a scavenger hunt doesn't help. Thankfully, the HD remake eases the pain of the shards, making an already great game better. Once you get past the Triforce shards, the game does ramp up to its epic conclusion. On the other hand, I thought the pacing in Twilight Princess was near perfect once you get past the slow beginning. Again, Nintendo decided to fix that in the HD remake. they removed a whole fish worth of gameplay. Total game changer. Honestly, I like the slow, relaxed beginning. It shows Link living a calm, peaceful life before having his life shattered by the Twilight. It's a stark contrast to what happens during the rest of the game. Twilight Princess was also the first game I grew emotionally attached to. I was thoroughly invested in the story being told. The mystery of the Twilight frightened but intrigued me. What might seem like a drab, boring atmosphere to some, to me felt mesmerizing. I loved the idea of light and twilight at odds only to join together to stop a common enemy. But to be fair, the story wouldn't have nearly as much impact if it wasn't for Midna. I didn't fully trust Midna at first. I thought she was a conniving, evil little monster who wanted to use Link for her own gain. In fact, that's exactly what she was towards the beginning. But I grew to love her as a narrative peeled back layers of her character, dare I say more than any other Zelda character. She's sassy, witty, and humorous on the outside, but inside, she's a warm, thoughtful, duty-bound individual. And she's hot! Her transformation from a manipulative imp to dear friend make her one of the best characters in Zelda. And who didn't shed tears when Midna left Link for good? Heartless monsters, that's who. All that being said, Twilight Princess's cast isn't the strongest. I do enjoy Ordon Village and Hyrule Castle, and the snot-nosed brats to an extent, but aside from Ilia, Agatha, and Malo, they're not very memorable. There are bright spots, but they don't shine as bright as, say, Midna. Zelda in particular is thrown to the side, to the point you wonder why the game isn't called The Legend of Midna. Well, The Legend of Midna Twilight Princess would be redundant. Aside from saving Midna and helping Link take out Ganondorf, Zelda mostly takes a backseat the entire game. It makes sense since Midna is the star of Twilight Princess, but consequently, Zelda became nothing more than a puppet for the villain, literally. I think every Zelda game needs a Zelda one way or another, but to see her as a side character like this is a little disappointing. Wind Waker's version of Zelda, Tetra, is almost the exact opposite of Twilight Princess Zelda. Sassy, bossy, courageous, Tetra just oozes character. It's almost impossible not to love her. Her pirate captain background easily makes her the most unique Zelda. Sure, she ends up in the plot dungeon for the later half of the game or so, but the relationship you build with her makes her worth saving, especially when compared to Twilight Princess Zelda. Another fantastic Wind Waker character is Ganondorf. We all know how evil this guy can be, but for the first time, Wind Waker Ganondorf gives us a peek at the motivations behind his crimes. He envied the winds of Hyrule, the fortune and prosperity it brought. Unlike Twilight Princess Ganondorf, whose motivation was more or less, somebody's gotta be the final boss, and we know Zant can't do it. Honestly, I like the twist of Ganondorf pulling the strings in Twilight Princess, and felt his final boss fight to be very satisfying. But I also see why older Zelda fans would be disappointed in seeing another Ganondorf steal the limelight, kicking Zant off to the side. However, my biggest problem with this Ganondorf is that he's a big step back from Wind Waker Ganondorf. Instead of a complex individual, we get a typical villain obsessed with power. To clarify, I don't dislike Twilight Princess Ganondorf, I just think Wind Waker did it better. I could go on comparing the different plot points and characters, but I'll end this section here. In short, Twilight Princess has the better story, but Wind Waker has the more memorable characters, despite Midna being the best Zelda character ever. Maybe I should do a Tetra vs Midna video. Arguably one of the Zelda series' weakest aspects is combat. Z-target. Wait. Press button once. Collect your prize. Press button 3 times for extra tough enemies. Combat is much more puzzle focused, meaning most fights go from tough to dramatically easy once you figure the enemy's weakness. And even then, some enemies are easily disposed of with 3 jabs of Link's sword. I would be too. Hey, phrasing. It wasn't until Breath of the Wild rejuvenated the series that combat became a strong selling point for many. However, I believe there was a game with a good combat system by Zelda standards, Twilight Princess. Yeah, you're just Z-targeting and pressing a button most of the time, I'm not denying that. But your options to take out most enemies in Twilight Princess exceeded any Zelda before that. Known as hidden skills, these secret moves are learned gradually as you progress the plot. These make it quicker to take out various foes, including heavy armored foes. Plus, it looked pretty sick pulling these moves off. Shield bash! Oh, that sounds sick. Okay, let's do this. What, that's it? You could roll to the side before black slash open your enemy's head with a helm splitter, unleash a super spin attack, kill your enemies with mortal draw, or finish off your enemy with a brutal finishing move. Just be careful not to miss. Sure, the game would prompt you to take these actions, but you don't have to follow those promptings, although it is recommended. Wind Waker also includes some of those epic moves, or rather, Twilight Princess borrowed some of its moves from Wind Waker, the Roll and Slash and the Helm Splitter being two that I can think of. Yet I still find Twilight Princess moves more enjoyable.
I see your fanboys coming out.
Maybe a bit, but there is some reasoning behind this. In Wind Waker, these moves are available to you the moment you get your sword and shield. You don't even need a tutorial to unlock them. They are available from the beginning. For some, that might be a huge plus, similar to Breath of the Wild's approach to combat. But for me, I love the progression of learning the hidden skills over time, as well as the lore implications. Gaining a new skill meant Link was becoming a skilled swordsman. After learning the final skill with Master Sword in hand, you finally become a man chosen by the goddess, a person worthy of taking the hero Time's place. Not to say that the hero Shade is the hero of Time, per se. I mean, it's possible, and Hyrule Historia backs it up, but we all know how trustworthy that source is. The point is, having a Wolf Saphos-like teacher does wonders to the imagination and world building, versus Orchid Man over here. Although I'm not sure who would win in a 1v1 match. Of course, there's more to Zelda combat than just whacking baddies with a sword. You can whack enemies with sticks too, and boomerangs, and hook shots, and hammers, and Beyblades, and balls, and unfortunately, not every item you wield is incredibly useful. But if using the fishing rod in Twilight Princess to murder Ganondorf taught me anything, it's that any item can be a murder weapon. Wind Waker also has a fun array of items and weapons to use, with most becoming more useful as the game progresses. For example, the hookshot remains one of your weapons of choice towards the end game, despite receiving it in the second dungeon. Not only is it necessary for you to cross large pits, it's helpful for stealing loot from enemies and scavenging the seafloor for loot. Even once you find the claw shot, the hookshot remains in your equipped items because it has an important role to fill. And that's the case with a lot of items in Wind Waker. Some items might be one-trick ponies, but they're still useful hours down the road, unlike Twilight Princess. Whoa, a Beyblade! This is what I always wanted! Thanks, goddess. Oh, you're welcome, Link. Now promise me you won't get bored with it after this dungeon. Need a ball and chain! Heroes these days. Joking aside, there are quite a few one-hit wonder items in Twilight Princess. Wind Waker might have a couple, but Twilight Princess is the prime offender. Particularly the spinning top, the ball and chain, and the Dominion Rod. Once you leave the dungeon you find the item in, you hardly ever use them again. However, if you try to 100% complete the game, meaning gathering all the heart pieces and all the Poe souls, you will be using these items quite a bit. Plus, it's just so satisfying to do this. Actually, I find many of Twilight Princess items to be quite satisfying, especially the double claw shot. I mean, come on, that's so cool. You wanna know what else is cool? Bow and arrows. Now here's a question. What kind of arrow is best? That's a ridiculous question. False. Bomb arrows. Well, that's debatable. There are basically two schools of thought. Fact, bomb arrows melt ice. Bomb arrows melt ice arrows. Bomb arrows do not... What is going on? What are you doing? I'll admit, fire and ice arrows in Wind Waker are legitimately creative weapons, helping you solve intriguing puzzles and side quests. They are a lot of fun to use. Plus, the gyro aiming included in the HD version offers that extra bit of immersion that I personally enjoy. That said, it's got nothing on the bomb arrows. Not only are the bomb arrows a great way to solve puzzles, it is so satisfying to use. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Riding through Hyrule, bombing obstacles in your path is awesomely convenient, and I can't help but take out boblins with a good bomb from time to time. It's just another layer of combat that adds to an already cool game. Ah, but you're forgetting about Wind Waker's best combat feature, using enemy weapons. If by best you mean most underutilized, then yeah, sure. I've got nothing against stealing an enemy's weapon. Using their own spear or sword to murder them is quite enjoyable. Can't believe I just said that. But after the baddies die and you break open their wallet, that new weapon loses all its meaning. You can't take it with you. You can't store it in your inventory. The most you can do is throw it against the wall in frustration, which does help relieve some stress. Psh, looks like someone got spoiled with Breath of the Wild. Sorry to break it to you, but this has been a small gripe of mine way before Breath of the Wild was a thing. I always wanted to store the Darknut sword and use it as my lucky machete, but alas, the game was not designed with that in mind. Oh, how it teases me. I don't want you to think I hate Wind Waker's combat or find it boring. Wind Waker is an incredibly fun game, but when you compare it to Twilight Princess's epic moves and awesome weapons, Twilight Princess edges it ever so slightly. The strongest aspect of any Zelda game would have to be the dungeons, until Breath of the Wild flipped that stereotype on its head as well, but that's beside the point. Back in the day, a good Zelda game was in part measured by its dungeons. Fortunately, the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess both have tremendously designed dungeons, some of the best in the series in fact. In Wind Waker, the best dungeon might just be the very first one, the Forsaken Fortress. On your first trip, Link gets fired from a cannon to infiltrate the fortress, leading to a surprisingly tense stealth mission. But once you collect your sword and reach your sister at the top of the tower, you get your butt handed to you by the Hammerrock King. 3 dungeons later, you come back to the Forsaken Fortress to exact revenge on the filthy feathery demon, after Phantom Ganon straight up gives you the weapon to defeat his pet. I wonder how I can use this hammer to get Hyrule back. I know! I'll give it to the hero! Ha! I'm a genius. Well, your first stealth mission was more of a mini tutorial for dungeons and other new mechanics. The second playthrough of the Forsaken Fortress shows you how strong Link has become since he left on his journey. It's like taking a walk down memory lane, covered in moblin guts. Of course, once you reach the tippy top, Ganondorf still knocks you around like a plushie, which shows you once again how far you have to go. The Forsaken Fortress also offers some sweet Link and Tetra moments, which I greatly appreciate. As a whole, Wind Waker dungeons offer a lot of interesting puzzles, fights, and themes, particularly the Earth Temple. This temple is the best example of how to do escort missions. Instead of being a Rito in distress, Medley actually helps you solve puzzles, like reflecting light onto statues. On top of that, the Earth Temple has this spoopy crypt theme, making it stand out more than other Wind Waker dungeons. It's well designed, good paced. It's too bad the final boss is a disappointment. Okay, I think I've praised Wind Waker enough. Time to gush about Twilight Princess.
Oh, here it comes.
Dungeons are Twilight Princess's greatest strength. They are aesthetically unique, offer new puzzle ideas, and are tailored well to the dungeon's weapon. Sure, not every dungeon is a home run, namely the Forest Temple, but the great ones make up for it and then some. It's hard for me to choose, but my favorite would have to be Arbiter's Ground. Ooh, so original. It's a lot of people's favorite for a reason. I'm amazed how well designed this dungeon is. Each room flows to the next, allowing for minimal backtracking without feeling overly restrictive. Part of that flow has to do with the theme itself. While other Zelda games have done spooky, scary dungeons, Arbiter's Ground cranks up the scary. Link wasn't the only one petrified when they heard this scream. Yes, redeads exist in Wind Waker, but they're even more horrifying in Twilight Princess. On top of that, you have the demonic pose, Stalfos, Stalkin, Quickstand, Tiny Scarabs, the Demon Sword mini-boss. Let's just say I always played with the lights on. But then you get the spinner, and the dungeon basically becomes a skate park. Stick moves, brah! The Star-Lord boss fight uses the spinner amazingly, and is one of the best boss fights in Zelda. It might be a little easy, but it's suspenseful and thrilling to ride up the rails and smack Star-Lord, and then wail on him. Story-wise, Arbiter's Ground is where you first learn about Ganondorf's banishment to the Twilight Realm, one of the biggest twists in the game. So in that sense, it's incredibly impactful. Plus, the top of Arbiter's Ground is where you and Midna part ways at the end of the game. Never mind, I hate it. So, which has the better dungeons? Oh, Twilight Princess, hands down. The creativity and design in Twilight Princess easily puts it above Wind Waker's dungeons. Not to say I don't like the dungeons, it's just they don't have the same impact as Twilight Princess dungeons. To be fair, Twilight Princess dungeons do share a similar build, a center room with branching paths. I've heard some use that as a point against it, but is that really a bad thing? None of the dungeons behave the same way thematically or design-wise. Each has their own unique take on the one room, separate branches. In my eyes, it helps make for a better streamlined experience. I also think Wind Waker is slightly lacking in the amount of dungeons. It just needs one more amazing dungeon to top it off. A lot of people refer to Great Fish Island as the best place to put a dungeon, and that could work. But if I could choose one dungeon to add, it would be the Ghost Ship. Not only would it have broken up the monotony of the Triforce quest, but the Ghost Ship was talked up by the fishmen since the beginning of the game, so I expected an epic swashbuckling adventure on the ship. But when it came time to board the ship, I got this. I wanted a dungeon on a haunted ghost ship. It only makes sense for a game centered on sailing. Instead, I got a mediocre fight. You can't mention dungeons without enemies to fight and bosses to kill. Both games deliver their own take on classic Zelda foes, while also throwing in epic battles. Personally, I think Twilight Princess bosses are some of the scariest, most intimidating, and best designed bosses in the series. I've already mentioned Star-Lord, But there are so many classics like Morphle, Blazetta, Armagoma, Argorok, and even Zant. Each of these fights were epic battles full of great cinematic moments and quick puzzle solving. The only flaw? They are stupidly easy. Not only are their weaknesses incredibly easy to figure out, but some you can manipulate to the point that they never get to attack. And the few times you do mess up and let them attack, they hardly do any damage. You know, for being a big scary fish, you don't do a whole lot. To be fair, easy boss battles are almost a staple in 3D Zelda games. Maybe we've learned Nintendo's tricks of the trade and they can't fool us into thinking an easy fight is actually mentally challenging. But Twilight Princess cranks the difficulty to rock bottom easy. However, despite their low level of difficulty, I enjoy the Twilight Princess boss fights for the most part. Could be evidence that I'm not an incredibly gifted gamer, but I recognize the good boss design in most of these fights. Star-Lord, Armagoma, and Agorok are prime examples of excellent boss designs, even if they are a little easy. The Wind Waker also has its share of easy boss fights, but what sets it apart from Twilight Princess fights are the designs. One look at Goma would make any child cry out in fear, and Mulgera genuinely creeps me out. Also, if you don't have a fear of marionettes, you obviously haven't seen Puppet Ganon. The problem with Wind Waker fights is usually how the fight is designed. Aesthetically, they are very memorable, but the fights themselves are just so bland. Jahala, is that how you pronounce his name? Jahala is the worst offender. It's more annoying than it is terrifying or epic. On the other hand, Twilight Princess boss fights are, for the most part, entertaining and action-packed, exactly what I want from a boss fight. Even the mini boss fights are superb. Wind Waker just uses common enemies as mini bosses. Wow, that's kinda lame. That said, Wind Waker's final boss blows Twilight Princess out of the twilight. See what I did there? Puppet Ganon is a great fight. It's memorable, forces you to strategize and think quickly. It's probably my favorite Wind Waker fight. And then you fight the real Ganondorf in all his dual-wielding glory, leading to the most satisfying ending battle in series history. Twilight Princess's final battle is not bad, although a little long. Personally, I would have been content with just fighting Beast Ganon and then Ganondorf in Hyrule Field. But for some reason, they found it necessary to throw Puppet Zelda in there. Her possessed design is actually gorgeous, but the fight is ultimately pointless. Do we have to have another tennis match? I hate tennis. But once you get past Puppet Zelda and Beast Ganon, the final sword fight with Ganondorf is a lot of fun. For those who complain about the mashing A button part, that's all you really do in other boss fights, so I don't see the problem. When you compare the two final fights, however, as well as the Ganondorfs themselves, it's clear that Wind Waker has the better final boss fight. Can we make this one short? Can I just give it to Wind Waker and call it a day?
No, I need to know why.
Fine. I don't mean to rag on Twilight Princess because I really do love it, but it's got nothing on Wind Waker in terms of art direction. Wind Waker is like playing through a cel-shaded anime film. The art style is charming and memorable, even by the time of the HD release. No game has quite matched its unique style, aside from the DS sequels. Granted, the GameCube version hasn't aged well, but that's what the HD remake is for. Its bright colors and gorgeous setting make it one of the best looking Zelda games. But I can't talk about Wind Waker's art direction without mentioning the facial expressions. Wind Waker Link is the most expressive Link, hands down. All of his emotions are effectively portrayed through his facial expressions in a way no other Link has quite done. Sure, Twilight Princess Link shows emotion on his face from time to time, but not like this. Part of that has to do with the cartoony style of Wind Waker, so I can see why other Zelda games don't show as much expression. That said, Wind Waker knows what its style is and sticks to it. It's not afraid to give Link a goofy smile, a determined face, or even a derp. Twilight Princess also has some beautiful art direction, albeit more grounded in realism. The character design and setting remind me of a high fantasy inspiration, rather than the fairy tale-like Wind Waker. Personally, I enjoy the high fantasy European style a little more. The problem is, Nintendo hid the style behind bloom and blur effects. Once you remove all that and turn up the brightness, you got yourself a pretty good looking game, which the HD remake does. You can't deny the attention to detail the towns and dungeons share, and I applaud it for that. Overall, I still think Wind Waker trumps Twilight Princess in art direction. Music, on the other hand, is tougher. The biggest thing holding Twilight Princess back in my book is the darn howling. It's not pleasant to listen to. I'd rather have Makar bash his fiddle against my head than listen to this. but there are phenomenal tracks in Twilight Princess. Midna's theme, Midna's Lament, Hyrule Field, the boss battle theme. Oh, it's so good! In fact, these are so good, I'm starting to wonder if Wind Waker can top it. How could it possibly beat these songs? Alright, Wind Waker has better music. Nothing encapsulates the tone of a game more than the Great Sea theme. Hyrule Field from Twilight Princess comes close, but the Great Sea theme is the definition of freedom and adventure on the high seas. Along with the other fantastic themes like Dragon Roost Island and the Songs of Sages, Wind Waker has one of the best OSTs ever. As much as it pains me to say it, Twilight Princess can't top it. But it is close. Maybe you have fond memories of playing Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the GameCube. In your young mind, both were captivating, enriching games that could do no wrong. But then years later, you go back to the originals only to find outdated graphics and rusty mechanics. Frankly, they both haven't aged well. HD remakes to the rescue! Both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess needed an HD remake. The question is, which remaster was better? Wind Waker HD makes the entire game brighter and prettier to look at. I am amazed how much better it looks. The lighting and colors are just vibrant and pop right out of the screen. Some other changes include tingle bottles, less Triforce treasure maps, some tweaks to items, gyro aiming, etc. But the greatest improvement, besides the graphics, is the swift sail, allowing you to sail in any direction. This changes Wind Waker for me by a lot. Cutting down that boring time makes for an all-around better experience. It's also optional for you purists out there, so please don't fret. Twilight Princess HD also comes with an overhaul in lighting. You can actually see the walls now! The game's infamous bloom and blur effect is replaced with improved lighting and textures. I am amazed at the details that were hidden behind the blur or were added for the remake. It really does make a difference in terms of visuals. The one thing that hasn't improved, however, are the character models. Characters are low polygon models that look better from afar than up close at times. Except for Midna, she looks good no matter what. Faces in general have improved, but it's the fingers, man. He's got baby hands! Creepy fingers aside, there are some nice quality of life improvements sprinkled in. Less Twilight bugs to catch, toggle button for wolf form, the ghost lantern helps you find pose, you can get a bigger wallet, the stupid rupee doesn't appear every time you turn off the game. Very passionate about that one. There are quite a few small changes, but nothing as game-changing as a swift sail in Wind Waker HD. While I would always prefer Twilight Princess HD over the original, Wind Waker HD is such an improvement over the GameCube version that I have to give Wind Waker HD the title of Best Remake. After returning to both these titles and rediscovering their triumphs and shortcomings, I believe the better game is Twilight Princess because of its captivating story, unique dungeons, and fun combat. Every time I pick up Twilight Princess, I'm whisked away by the adventures set before me, with Midna as my guide. I know there are flaws, and I tried to point them out in this video, but at the end of the day, if you ask me which game I prefer to play, I'm going to pick Twilight Princess every time. That said, Wind Waker is a phenomenal game in its own right. Any deep hatred that it received when it was released is unfounded in my opinion. It is a grand adventure set in a beautiful ocean full of discovery. And Tetra is precious, not gonna lie. Now, I'm not saying you can't dislike Twilight Princess or Wind Waker. Opinions are opinions after all. But I found there to be fantastic aspects to both of these titles. I encourage you to revisit these HD remakes to find the fantastic aspects of both, rather than comparing them to Ocarina of Time and saying they're mediocre sequels. Again, these are my opinions and preferences. If you feel differently and think Twilight Princess is the worst game, that's a-okay, but don't attack others for thinking differently than you. You can have a good debate, a debate is fine, but when you try to force down someone's throat that a game is good or that a game is bad, that's when there's an issue. But if you can't decide whether Twilight Princess or Wind Waker is bad even after watching this video, then there's only one way we can settle it. In Smash! Okay, we're doing this? Okay, you pick Wind Waker Link, and I'll pick Twilight What is this? Breath of the Wild? Where's Twilight Princess? I'm sure he's here, just let me find him. Just a sec, give me a sec. Where did he go? Ganondorf? Zelda? What is going on? Where did he go? Why did they do this? Thank you so much for watching. Which do you think is the better game? Did my bias towards Twilight Princess make this entire discussion pointless? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe for more. Goodbye, you good people.